Hey guys, so if some of you have watched the intro video, or this is the first time seeing me, go check out that intro video because it kind of explains what this channel is about. But it's the first substantive or argument or video getting put out on this channel. And so I think it's important to start out and talk about what's clearly been the biggest event of the past at least month, 2 months. Which is the attacks in Las Vegas and the arguments and to the Second Amendment that's once again is brought up. So, um, if you don't know by now, I don't know where you've been. Um, it a man, 64 years old, broke two windows in the Mandalay Bay Hotel, and started shooting what at the time sounded like an automatic weapon into a crowd of 22,000 attending a country concert. There was no cover for these people. There was really no way to effectively get out. And 59 people were killed, 500 some injured. I don't have the exact statistics right here with me on that. But clearly, once again, sparking up the debate of the Second Amendment and where does this fit in? How could we maybe have stopped this? And so this is going to be more of a debate for the Second Amendment and its merits, not off of what we commonly hear. The common arguments you hear is with the weapons and with what's being used is, well, how do you use that to hunt? Or do you really need that for self-defense of your house? And I think if people actually look into the Second Amendment, though those are things that, clearly firearms can be used for, it's not what the Second Amendment is meant for, nor what it's about. And to take a real look at it from the aspect of, well, the Second Amendment is meant to stop government tyranny, and in the end, it may come with other benefits, but, and this is to the exact wording of the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So the important part of that here is, to me, is being necessary to the security of a free state. Being necessary. They don't. It's a pretty clear. It's a pretty clear wording there that this is what's necessary, and to keep the government from imposing other laws that may not fit into our Constitution or may oppress people. And one of the best ways I have to explain it is the Second Amendment guarantees all other amendments and freedoms given. So what backs up your First Amendment right to free speech, to go out and publicly protest? Well, because if the government tries to smash those protests, you have the Second Amendment. You have that. Well, here's where it is, where people are playing nice in a sense, and when the gloves come off, this is what really guarantees the right. And many people, when they hear this argument, think, oh, you fear the U.S. government is going to do something like that. You fear how crazy are you to think that this government would do that? And unfortunately, in many cases, yeah, I think it's a legitimate fear. I think it's a fear that's been seen throughout history, multiple times. And we see in some cases the Second Amendment being used effectively to defend against this. In some cases not, and in cases where it probably should have been. Um, so I'm gonna kind of take this at a case by case basis and start and look at, well, how could this case of a mass shooting have been stopped? Because this has been the big, these mass shootings that catch a lot of media attention, which is hard hard for me to kind of agree with. Though it is a lot of casualties at one time point in time in one short span, considering the fact that this is a monthly statistic for Chicago, expounded over years and years. It's hard to look at gun control simply through the lens of mass shooting. But in this case, of mass shooting is, how do you stop this? And I think the scary thing is, and why people often do go to um, this immediate state of fear, is there really isn't a way you stop this. Um, in the case of, especially in this case, in other cases, I don't believe that you can stop this. If a person is willing to hurt other people, they're going to do it in any way possible. You see this in Europe where guns are banned all over the place, and so they just start running cars into other people. Um, or Timothy McVeigh didn't use a gun; he used bombs. Even this man, whose name I'm not gonna say, I don't believe it needs to be put out there anymore, um, had the same bomb components that used fertilizer uh, in both of his houses that they searched. So if people are going to want to hurt people, they're going to hurt people. It's not, and on a large scale, you see it in China with knife attacks. You see it in uh, the Europe with the cars and the knives as well. Even in Paris, where gun control didn't mean anything when terrorists invaded and killed Charlie Hebdo. Um, the attacks in Paris against the concert, the American concert in Paris, they killed so many. The gun control didn't matter there because generally people who are going to break the law and are willing to kill people aren't stopping and saying, "Wait a second, let's make sure we're following the rules on this one." No, they're trying to kill hundreds, as many people as possible in the name of whatever they want, whether it be any race, any religion, any. They're trying to kill people in the name of whatever they're trying to kill people in. So they're not checking the rule books. They're not checking the laws. They're not. And to think that even if banning guns, you're going to stop people from getting guns, it doesn't work like that. I mean, we've seen this with the war on drugs. Banning cocaine didn't stop millions of tons of cocaine through going through Miami, and it certainly didn't slow it down. Um, so what you're really stopping there is the rights of people to defend themselves against government tyranny, which is what the Second Amendment is meant for. So the question of why don't we ban firearms, and why not just get rid of them? Why not, if they're being used for these types of mass shootings, if they're being because of their legitimate use for other reasons that far outweigh what damage they may cause, and oftentimes the damage they cause is because other people aren't armed. You look at where in the concert venue they weren't allowed to carry weapons, though I don't believe no one was going to be shooting. I think it was 1,200 meters. No one was going to be necessarily shooting back at them, but just the idea that there was a gun-free zone, that something like 98% of shootings happen where no one can defend themselves. You're literally ringing a dinner bell anytime you put a gun, you're not allowed to carry a firearm in here sign up. Um, and that's why schools are such popular targets. Movie theaters, places that tend to ban firearms, are popular targets because you have the easy pickings, and you're not going to fire. People aren't going to shoot back, and um, oftentimes when someone is armed within the building, a private citizen or otherwise, the shooting ends much quicker. Um, so, not just talking about that, but looking at the legitimate use of the Second Amendment in against government tyranny comes down to history. And when you look at gun laws, um, anytime the government is looking to subdue someone, the first thing they will do is take away their rights to fight back. And you can look at Europe, you can look at Asia, but the best examples are here at home where we have had examples of this that oftentimes aren't allowed to look, people aren't willing to look at, and the biggest examples we have of this is against African Americans during the 60s, and before us, between the end of the Civil War and the end of the civil rights movements, kind of in the early to late 70s, where gun ownership was a big thing in the African American communities because it was their guarantee. Because oftentimes the government wasn't going to be there to stop them. Very few governments in the South were going to stop the KKK from going in and burning crosses or killing African Americans, or if they weren't doing all and up to aiding and abetting the KKK, which oftentimes they were. And the first gun laws truly ever passed in America banning weapons was banning the rights of freemen after the American Civil War in 1867, from carrying firearms. This was due to the fact that they wanted, and the governments of the South wanted, for the KKK to kind of be unrivaled. And it worked. When you started saying, look, African Americans can't carry firearms, um, then it came down to, well, then who has the firearm? Who's left with the firearms? It's white people. And they were able to go in, and the KKK was able to go in and wreak havoc, to attack houses without any fear of real retribution. Now, I'm not saying they can't use something else. It's possible. But the firearm's the great equalizer. And if you are going up, I mean, it's a famous saying, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. And it rings true. So when you take the guns away from all but one side, and then say, go at it, the side with the guns, no matter what other disadvantages they might have, are generally going to lose that fight. And you saw that in the South with the KKK being largely successful and able to attack at whim without fear of any retribution. Um, as time went on, though, however, freemen and the African American community ended up really getting into the gun ownership thing and kind of realizing this might not be such a bad idea, this defense, and figuring and getting laws passed and going to places where the laws allowed them to carry firearms. Um, and a big example of the firearms being used to great effect to defend themselves, is in the Tulsa race riots. 200 African Americans were killed in these riots. But the only reason the riots stopped was when the KKK was fought back by armed African Americans. They were able to fight back and beat back and kill 50 of the KKK members because they were armed. Now, the KKK was going to cause damage in any way possible. The African Americans were still, though Tulsa was one of the centers for African American wealth and power at the time, and was one of their really big footholds and their really big step forward. The KKK still, and the white population there still outnumbered them, and the people who disliked them still outnumbered them. And when they decided to attack, the only thing that was going to stop that from ending in all black men, women, and children dead was their carrying of firearms. Um, though the casualties weren't good, it allowed the African American population to fight back. Another example is the Deacons for Defense and Justice. They were an African American group in the South during the Civil Rights Movement, armed with 38 specials, which, if you're not a gun person, is a small handgun, and an M1 carbine, which is a small rifle. And a few of the marches done in the South provided armed security for Dr. Martin Luther King. It kind of ensuring this. If they're going to have guns, if people are going to attack us, we have the right to defend ourselves. And because the government was either aiding and abetting or not doing anything, was aiding and abetting these people, the KKK, you had no other place to turn. When the government turns their back on you, you have nowhere else to go. So it's a scary word in American, in kind of modern American society, but this personal responsibility, well, they're not going to be there forever. Look at the average police time, the average time it takes for a police officer to get to your house, or an ambulance. They're not there for you all the time 100%. They're not a security blanket. The government can't be everywhere at once, nor should it be. And especially because if the government decides to turn its back on you, what you have left is yourself. And as the Second Amendment clearly states, your firearm. Another example is the Battle of Hayes Pond, where a group of mainly African American but Native Americans who gained the legal stance of Native American, see if I can find the exact name of these people. I think it's the Ojibwe Indian tribe. The local KKK group was planning to attack them and was starting off their whole little rally event of let's go attack these people by grouping up and burning a large cross by Hayes Pond. The Ojibwe Native American tribe surrounded them, fired a few shots, put them into a panic, and beat them off. The only casualties of the entire night was 4 wounded, only because these people were armed and ready to defend their rights and freedoms. When the government wanted to even further impress, this is the use of laws. When you look at the next time gun laws are really used in a racist manner to control a population that the government wants to subjugate, is when you look at the California ban on certain types of weapons in 1967. This came out of the fact that the Black Panthers were using firearms to follow around and intimidate police who might be willing to treat African Americans unfairly, and were treating African. I don't want to wash that over. They were beating African Americans in the streets. There was horrible police injustice, and the way the Black Panthers stopped this was by strapping a rifle to their back and following the police around and say, "Oh, do you want to beat a man in the street senseless now? Is this what we're going to do now? Because we know how this is going to end." And almost immediately, it took less than a month, and open carry was banned in California. And police were back to doing what they had been doing before. The firearms is simply a motion, because the moment you take the firearm away from someone is the moment you're the moment that the person who has lost their firearm, more easily susceptible to government attack. And in the end, it is government, because you hear this outcry of only the army. You see commonly, I think one of the quotes on that circulates around on social media is, "Oh, if you want to, learn to shoot an AR-15, join the army and serve for 2 years." Well, one, the army doesn't use AR-15s, so whoever wrote that clearly didn't know what they were talking about. But two, um, if you want to talk about concentrating something in the 1%, like Bernie does, at that point you're concentrating firearms in the 1%. And our leaders, as crazy as people, which is the argument that blows my mind now, is all these people calling for gun control, who were literally 2 days ago calling Trump Hitler, and kind of saying, if he's Hitler, and all your predictions come true of him taking him taking the gays away, him taking, kicking the door of any Muslim or transgender person, or all these things you accuse him of wanting and being willing to do, the first thing I'd want is a firearm. Because I know for a fact that if some law, whatever, was passed to which American citizens were being taken against their will, at least for now, with the laws we have now, it's not going to go through if at least I have anything to say about it. Because you open my door and you're trying to search for that, or search for Muslims, then I shoot. There's no, and that's the thing, is the moment you take those firearms away, there is no defense, and you've concentrated all the firearms in a small area with no benefit truly gained. And so the idea, when people bring hunting or other areas into this, it's muddying the water. It's trying to make an argument look ridiculous and for people who believe in the Second Amendment, you should say, no, that's not what it's about. Great, yeah, you can't hunt with that weapon. That's not what it's intended for. It's not what it's intended. You can't carry that on the street, and defend against a mugger. It's not meant for defending against a mugger. It's defending against, well, the government wants to come and take me away for whatever reason. They're not going to. They're simply not. And to also look and say, well, the argument is, well, this isn't going to happen now. This isn't now. Part of this is securing that right for future people. Is because if you let the Second Amendment go now, and you have all this power concentrated in the government, it only grows and expounds. And the government then doesn't fear any retribution. So they're willing to take things to extremes that they weren't before. So this is kind of a long video. Didn't think I'd talk for that long, but I do want to know your thoughts and your ideas on this topic. If you kind of like what I'm saying and you want to hear more of it, subscribe. If you have any arguments or objections, there's a comment section. I will read all comments, and thank you and have a nice day.